You have a son here?
All right, lesson 13. We're going to start discussing the chakras one by one. And we start with Ajna Chakra, because Ajna Chakra is, for our purpose, is the most essential chakra, as it is the mental body, where we work on when we meditate. And it is this center that gives us the possibility to control thought, to practice mind control, as it is called. So normally you would systematically start at the beginning, and with the chakras you would start with Muladhara Chakra. We do that in the second session later today. First Ajna Chakra, but because of the importance of Ajna Chakra, we have talked about most of what is in this handout already at lesson 3 in a handout called Dharana, Ajna and Om. Because now we are at lesson 13, and from lesson 1 we already start with meditations after the asana practice, and that's why I've pulled the subject to lesson 3 as an extra subject. It's not scheduled as an extra subject, so that you know what you're doing and what you're doing it for when you meditate after asana. Ajna Chakra, because of its function as the mental body, is called the commander-in-chief, because what we are dealing with below Ajna Chakra is 5 chakras that are all related to emotions and desires. And it is those emotions and desires that lead to disharmony. It leads to suffering, misery. It leads to instability. And all these conditions that I'm describing here is what people are dealing with in daily life. It is natural, it is normal. But ancient yogis came to the conclusion that if you can find a way to reduce the activity of the lower chakras, you become more sattvic, energy starts to rise, and you function on higher levels of consciousness naturally. So, when you do other yoga courses, you're very often hearing all kinds of complicated things about how to bring about higher consciousness. But in the end, it's really simple. It's really about creating certain circumstances, which we have talked about also in a material way: stability, safety, security. But also internally, of course, that we develop awareness of the emotions and desires that function as signals. They are telling us something about our condition or situation that we are in, and they're designed to make us take action, to find a better condition, to decrease disharmony or instability. But because human beings function mainly subconsciously, they're not aware of it. And they either don't listen to those signals and just suffer from them in a passive way, not understanding that these signals are designed to prompt you to take action, or they just passively suffer from all these movements of energy, which is basically what they are. Now, Ajna Chakra, in the past, when structural education as we know it in the modern world didn't exist, people were illiterate, people were merely living like animals based on instincts, lower emotions and desires. Structural education has its flaws, and I've heard yogis, yoga masters say that education is bad because it puts so much conditioning into people, which is one of the flaws, I think. But one of the good things of education in most parts of the world these days is compulsory, even to such extent that if your parents keep you out of school, your parents first will be fined, and if they still keep you out of school, they can end up in prison. Governments deem structural education so important. This is the reason why. It develops Ajna Chakra. It does come with a lot of pollution because of all the everything that you have to learn and memorize. And while the yoga way is to develop Ajna Chakra without the pollution, by concentration and meditation. And you will then start to develop your own interests and find, through contemplation, insights on those interests that are close to heart. So that is what is different between structural education and the ancient way of developing intellect and reason. The big problem that we are facing always in everything that we do is subconscious functioning. And when you practice yoga, asana, starting with asana, if you do it in a meditative way, and meditation, one of the things that starts to happen is that you develop awareness of your subconscious thought flows. And that allows us to eventually take control. The moment we are aware of lower emotions and desires that lead to restless mental activity, when it is subconscious, we have no choice. We will just act upon it and end up often in conflict or turmoil or another form of instability and suffering. But now you are aware and you say, hey, I see what is happening here. And now you have an on and an off button. You can choose. You can let it happen if it is deemed auspicious. But you can turn it off. You can decide not to let it go through when you can already anticipate that it's going to lead to disruption or a negative outcome. So that is why Ajna Chakra is the commander-in-chief, because it can overrule what is happening below, in the lower chakras. In Sattva, we mentioned this already in lesson 3, but in Sattva, the Ajna Chakra expresses itself as observation. Observation is that condition that you are in when you meditate, but to understand it better is when you're daydreaming. Remember when you're daydreaming, how you feel? You feel timeless. You feel infinite. Just for a moment you are detached from the material world around you. And you feel sattvic. At the moment that you think, hey, I'm daydreaming, how nice, it's gone. When you're daydreaming, you're in a very high contemplative mood. You absorb, you soak up something that touched you. It is in those moments that you have epiphanies, that you have deep insights, that you connect dots. That is the condition that occurs when, as a non-yogi, accidentally you enter in a condition of sattva. That can be when you sit on a bench in the park, especially in spring when the weather is nice, the sun is shining and the wind is blowing a little bit. It's not too hot yet and it's not cold anymore like in the winter. You hear the birds chirping and fluttering around and it just feels good. And you sit there on a bench and just for a moment you're in the zone. That That is the condition that then allows you to deeply observe on a level that is otherwise not possible. In the past, yogis practiced science in this way. It is how ancient sciences came into being. It is how ancient inventors or philosophers came to their insights. All based on sheer contemplation. So that is what happens when there is sattva. When there is rajas, rajas leads to creation of thought and thought control. So that is what happens because people have a natural tendency to be in a tamas condition. Thought control is non-existent in that condition. And in a tamas condition, there's often a tendency to end up in a negative spiral downwards, leading to depression and negative thought. When there is rajas, or a light form of rajas, it leads to thought control. That is what you use when you meditate. After your asana practice, you're not just sattvic, you're sattvic with a light touch of rajas, a light touch of Shakti domination. And that is where you take control of the mind. Mind control becomes possible as a result of that. Now, talking about the daydreaming and the sattva condition in Ajna Chakra, I always tell the story of doing exams in school. I should not skip that part because maybe you'll recognize something here. When I was before I came to Korea, I prepared in various ways. One of the ways was to go to night school to learn, to study, especially business administration and economy. And there's adult education, so it's a little bit different from the compulsory education, elementary, middle, and high school. But nevertheless, that's not really so important. What is important is how people behave. And people prepare for their exams, of course, some more than others. But what I observed is that many people, before the exam starts, they gather in the canteen before the bell rings and you enter into the classroom. And they're still frantically trying to have more input, looking at their notes, everything that they need to memorize before the exam takes place. And that's when blackouts happen. Because an exam is best done, you perform at your best when you're sattvic, when you're relatively calm. So what I always did, and I only later understood what I was doing and what the others were doing, but what I always did, I would prepare and I would come to school, I would get a cup of tea and I would just sit in the windowsill staring outside. I wouldn't have my books with me, my notebooks, just my pen and whatever it is that I need to do the exam. I would sit in the windowsill and just buzz out, looking at the traffic passing by, the people walking towards the bus stop and so on. And just what I realized later what I was doing is just to stay in sattva. And this is very interesting because the people that frantically prepare for their exam up until the moment that they enter the classroom, they often black out. The moment that they need the answers, it's not there, they're stuck. If you're relatively sattvic, it can even happen that you are confronted with questions that you do not know the answer to, but you know what it is about. And you give an answer that at least touches upon the subject, and you always get points for that. Instead of leaving it blank because you don't know the exact answer. You give an answer that touches the subject, that makes the corrector, the teacher, who is correcting your exam paper, have a feeling that you know what you're talking about. And you always get points for that. That is what sattva does. The sattva is a condition, it's not a luxury. It leads to an amazing difference in how we function. All the rest has been discussed at length. One thing, meditation, of course. If you practice asana meditatively and in such a way that it leaves you with a deep sattva, Ajna Chakra is automatically sattvic, leading to the contemplative power. It is the same effect that meditation has, but it's not controlled. When you practice asana correctly, of course, because only then it works, there's no controlled mind focus. But if in addition to your asana practice, you have some time to also do meditation, you just reinforce that process. It just deepens what you have already achieved in your asana practice. Now, I also included in the handouts this one, Pregnant Through Prayer. And I did that to give an idea of the power of thought and the importance of positive thought. But if you have read, I found this article in a Dutch medical magazine. I just accidentally came across it many years ago. And I thought, this is about the power of thought. And many people are skeptical about it. And if you read this article, I translated it from Dutch to English, but trying to be as close to the original as possible to convey the author's feeling behind this. Because you can feel the skepticism and the sarcasm in the way that it was written. What is it about? It's actually about a research project that they did in a Korean hospital, the Cha Hospital, that is famous for IVF treatment. And what the researchers did was they took a group of women who were under treatment. It says 199 women who were under IVF treatment to get pregnant, and they divided the group in two. Then they asked 3 groups of Christians in the US, Canada and Australia to pray for these women, to pray for them to become pregnant. For one group. The other group was the placebo group. Interestingly, out of the group for which was prayed, 50% of the women became pregnant. Out of the placebo group, only 26% became pregnant. That is a huge difference. It's a clear difference. Let's say it like that. Now, people who are academically educated, scientifically educated, are skeptical about subtle energy. They did this research to prove it wrong. That is why the author is so skeptical and sarcastic. They set up the research project basically to prove it wrong. Maybe it was a joke. But what they did is they actually proved the opposite. They proved it right. And they tried to write it off in this article as just a coincidence just like crossing fingers or twiddling your thumbs, hoping that something would happen. But in reality, we know this is the power of Ajna Chakra. And the project was in Korea, but the people praying were tens of thousands of miles away, kilometers away. And the power of thought, the power of Ajna Chakra, is not influenced by distance. It is direct, like the speed of light. And it is a phenomena that you sometimes experience yourself when you grab your phone and you're about to call somebody, and the phone rings, and it is actually that person that you were about to call. What happened? You connected with each other. You thought of each other somewhere subconsciously. And while that person is about to call you, you pick up that vibration and you think, hey, I'm going to call that person, and the phone rings. So it's either that person started thinking of you or you started thinking of that person that makes that person call. But that is how you connect in the ether with one another. And it is a phenomenon that exists. When I introduced this handout, I said it shows us the importance of the power of thought, but especially it shows the power of positive thought. And that means automatically the power of negative thought. Voodoo is a practice to harm people based on negative thought. They have all kinds of rituals which are superficial. What it is really about is the power of thought used in a black way, in a black magic way, in an evil way. As yogis, of course, we are representatives of the light. We have to accept responsibility for the effect that our thought processes have on people. And it means we need to be more and more vigilant of negative thought, of violent thought, and replace that consciously with compassion, with positive thought instead, because we know that that affects people in a positive way. All right. I also added a chakra chart, which was made by one of the students, and I really appreciated that and always send it to the students, because it has all the details of the chakras, just for your information. Questions about Ajna Chakra? We have another subject, that is the introduction of Kriya, but Kriya becomes part of our meditation. So we will first do asana, and then we have another short lecture about practice of Kriya, what it means and how we're going to do that. It's a preparation for energy control, towards pranayama, energy control. All right, let's take a short break.